Hello again, this is Troy, and I'm still on my revolutionary road trip making videos for my book, The Next Copernican Revolution. I'm somewhere in Bavaria, Germany now. I've got about a 6-hour drive ahead of me, making my way towards the Czech Republic again. So I pulled off here and I wanted to work on, this is the fifth video in this series, and this video is in correlation to chapter 4 of my book. And this book is entitled Anthropological Myth Busting, Marketplaces, Barter, and Debt. And in this chapter, I reference the anthropologist David Graeber, who wrote the book Debt, the First 5,000 Years. His book was quite influential to me, and he's got another book that just came out called Bullshit Jobs, which is also, I think, going to help us flip the paradigm. But in this book, he's basically destroying a myth on 3 different areas. Number one, that money is merely a neutral medium of exchange. He points out that as far back through the historical and archaeological records, we can see how people with money and power, or the power that money gave them, has been used to basically benefit themselves at the expense of everybody else. Basically impoverished and enslaved everybody else. Here's a quote from his book that basically shows how money is anything but neutral. This is what money meant to the majority of people for most of human history. The terrifying prospect of one's, a debtor's, sons and daughters being carried off to the homes of repulsive strangers to clean their pots and provide the occasional sexual services, possibly for years, conceivably forever, as their parents waited, helpless, avoiding eye contact with their neighbors who knew exactly what was happening to those they were supposed to have been able to protect. He shows how money and debt have greatly influenced and skewed the very nature of how we relate to each other, our morality, and our understandings of the world. Here's another quote. To tell the history of debt and money is to reconstruct how the language of the marketplace has come to pervade every aspect of human life, even to provide the terminology for the moral and religious voices raised against it. The concept of debt, he is saying, influenced the major religions' notions of redemption, sin, and morality. The second myth about money that Graeber busts is the notion that sophisticated society comes after the invention of money and after the invention of commercial exchange, and that buying and selling are the basis of human society. He documents how basically we had very sophisticated and advanced societies long before we had money. The third myth that Graeber busts is the myth of barter. And you hear it all the time today when somebody brings up the notion of a world beyond money or what they had in primitive societies before money. The first argument they revert back to is that they had barter economies. So here's what he said about that. When economists speak of the origins of money, first comes barter, then money. Credit only develops later. By now, this story has become simple common sense for most people. We teach it to children in school books and museums. Everybody knows it. Once upon a time, there was barter. It was difficult, so people invented money. Then came the development of banking and credit. It all forms a perfectly simple, straightforward progression, a process of increasing sophistication and abstraction that has carried humanity, logically and inexorably, from the Stone Age exchange of Mastodon tusks to stock markets, hedge funds, and securitized derivatives. So, in previous chapters, I talked about the openness and the willingness to be wrong about what we think we know about how the world works. So if we've been taught that money evolved from barter, then most definitely we have been taught wrong. For centuries now, explorers have been trying to find this fabled land of barter, and none with success. Graeber says, to this day, no one has been able to locate a part of the world where the ordinary mode of economic transaction between neighbors takes the form of, I'll give you 20 chickens for that cow. It just never really existed. So why is this important? There's basically three different reasons that I think it's important to acknowledge the myth of money and barter. The first reason is because of the distorting effects that this myth has on what we think we know and what we have been led to believe and what we think is possible for the future. Graeber says this: rarely has a historical theory been so absolutely and systematically refuted. By the early decades of the 20th century, all the pieces were in place to completely rewrite the history of money. The curious thing is that it never happened. This new history was never written. Textbooks did not change their story, even if all the evidence made clear that the story was simply wrong. So here's the second reason it's important to understand this. And this refers to where we are now, or where we think we are. And I bring this up because right now there's so much talk about Bitcoin, right? And that Bitcoin is just the next evolution. We evolved from barter economies to money and now to Bitcoin. But basically Graeber argues and documents how we had elaborate credit systems for thousands of years. And he basically said what we now call virtual money came first. So what this means is that if Bitcoin and other virtual currencies are merely more advanced systems of exchange than what we had thousands of years ago, then have we really advanced that much at all? The third reason these understandings are important is so that we can fully understand what scarcity does to our society. So credit systems, money systems, and barter systems, they are all predicated on a reality of scarcity, that there just simply isn't enough to go around. They are all systems of rationing scarce resources. And maybe they were appropriate for certain select times in history. Now we are entering into a post-scarcity reality. And so that changes everything about the need to ration scarcity using money or barter or Bitcoin or anything else. And the fear of not having enough causes the need to quantify and measure the scarce resources, right? So this increasing quantification of the natural world has led to what I refer to as the transactionalization of life, the universe, and everything. And I've even written an essay with that very title. Here's what Charles Eisenstein had to say about that notion. Our money system embodies the maximum of the separate self. More for you is less for me. In a world of material scarcity, you can never afford to rest at ease. This is more than a mere belief or perception. Money as it exists today is not, as some teachings claim, just energy. At least it is not a neutral energy. It is always in short supply. When money is created as interest-bearing debt, as ours is, then always and necessarily there will be more debt than there is money. Our systems mirror our collective perceptions. More for you is less for me is a defining axiom of separation. True in a competitive money economy, it is false in earlier gift cultures in which, because of widespread sharing, more for you was more for me. Scarcity conditioning extends far beyond the economic realm, manifesting as envy, jealousy, one-upmanship, social competitiveness, and more. So, is it any wonder that given that we live in such a fearful and scarcity-based and disconnected existence in our modern society, that we've created a world that mirrors that with violence and destructive behavior? I'm actually surprised that we are as good as we are to each other, given that we live under a socioeconomic system that incentivizes fear and scarcity thinking and self-interest and competition. And I like to imagine what we might be capable of if we can someday transcend the notions of money and debt and competitiveness. So I'll see you on the next video back in the Czech Republic. Thank you so much.